when I said that it felt like I was walking down something that was hidden and the animals were placed around something? Do you want to see what I'm talking about? Are you ready? The buildings were eventually absorbed by the San Diego Zoo. And this is coming straight from the San Diego History Center website. Absorbed by the zoo. Let's continue. Remember that in 1935, they shut the California Tower down, or the Museum of Us, and the public was no longer able to see inside. 2 years before that, buildings south of the El Prado were gone by 1933, besides two. So there was, in my opinion, without a doubt, a clear operation at this time to hide this park from the public, to rewrite its history and make it fit into their mainstream narrative. Because in 1923, they knocked down the Sacramento Valley building, 8 years after the exposition. This building was outdated? No. And we all know about the fire stories by now. And if you haven't, get ready. The fire stories are the nod to the hidden group that these buildings are from the old world. They were built by a previous civilization. A house fire does not burn down stone, and it doesn't burn down marble or brick. It simply doesn't get hot enough, and we have shown this. The Southern California County's building burned down in 1925, right in the middle of all of these other buildings getting knocked down. So they just randomly have a fire? Of course they do. After what we know about the fires, this is normal and acceptable? No, it's not acceptable. So they give us the fire story, and then at the exact same time, rip all these other buildings down. And then at the same time, they make one off limits for 80 years to the public. And we're just supposed to trust this story? We all understand that the hidden past is that an extremely advanced previous civilization constructed these buildings very easily. A civilization that we are not being told about. A civilization that had all of the technology that we have today and much more. They had phones, TVs, planes, trains, artificial intelligence, and much more. All of these things are being given back to us since 1776, in my opinion. If you're interested in learning more about that, we have episode 10 and 38 that talk all about this. We are being lied to about these narratives with fake characters, fake construction companies that build two massive buildings and then never build anything ever again. With zero training, of course, changing buildings' names to attempt to trip us up in the research, and that's not going to work. They repeat names with the AI-generated stories, and on and on. So, 1933, 10 years after they tore down the Sacramento Valley building, 8 years after the fire story, they tear down two more buildings at Balboa Park, the San Joaquin Valley and the Carondelet County's building. So here we are given a construction photo of the Varied Industries building, which shows us the incredible construction process. Just look at those workers go. Look at all of the equipment, the dedication, never taking breaks, working by candlelight, no distractions. It shows us all of the men. It shows us a building that's done. This thing is done. This is a completion photo. But according to the city of San Diego, this is a construction photo. I mean, this is honestly equivalent to me going into the road right now and turning around and taking a picture of my house and telling everybody that it's a construction photo. This is not a construction photo. Where is the construction? And it gets even weirder when we look at the narrative, where in the beginning of its narrative, they named it the Agriculture and Horticulture Building. And then they switched it a year after the exhibition in 1916, which is normal. No. They switch it to the Foreign and Domestic Industries Building because it's a repurposed building. It's repurposed from the old world. Because the previous civilization did not build this building to have it changed purposes over and over. They built it for a reason, and it was not to be a foreign and domestic industries building. This is the same thing where the USA is the land of the free. Yeah, they got a lot of free buildings that were located on their land in 1776. So it's getting a lot clearer now. And of course, the next sentence proves what we're saying here. that all of these buildings located in Balboa Park were found and repurposed. All of the names were switched from the original name over and over, which I believe is the case with all old world buildings. None of them were originally a bank. They weren't post offices. They weren't Capitol buildings. This is a worldwide operation, and these stories are just that. They're stories. When the name of this building has changed many times since it was found, naming it the County Fair Building, the Food and Beverage Building, and on and on. And of course, this was just your average food and beverage building over 100 years ago, where we are told that the facade looked like the entrance to a church, and this church look was reinforced because it had the appearance of a bishop in a medallion above the central door, and a cross in the starburst medallion. Okay, so this place was obviously incredible, and its original purpose is much different than what it's used for today, just like all of these other buildings. So in 1970 to 1971, they destroyed this building in a reconstruction project. And of course, the new one did not replicate the original. Now remember, World War I was in 1914. This exposition was in 1915. People were not concentrating on the narrative and all of its lies. And even if they were, how were they going to tell thousands of people about it? It just wasn't possible. So what happened to this building? Well, the people of San Diego were at a crossroads. They were in a bind with what to do with such a pathetic, temporary building, because we're always told that these buildings were just temporary, right? But they last forever if they just left them alone. With incredible architecture. What would they possibly use it for? Well, 1 year after the exposition in 1916, they built this building, and now what? The military needed the space, so the building got to stick around, where they used it as a barracks and a post office. And what do you know? This building was also damaged. The money was, of course, not enough to fix it, so it continued to deteriorate. I wonder what a lot of these wars are actually used for. They wouldn't be an operation to destroy the old world, would they? Remember when we were told that they stopped allowing the public into the California Tower in 1935? Well, the mainstream history just can't put their finger on why the Farm Bureau discontinued the use of Balboa Park for its county fair in 1931, just 4 years before the public was no longer allowed to go inside these buildings. Well, I would say that we know exactly why they didn't want to hold any county fairs here anymore at Balboa Park. And this wouldn't be an operation without a second exposition at the exact same location of Balboa Park. This one being held at the exact same year of 1935. It's incredible. Clearly they have found something major that went against their narrative, and they needed to run it back a second time. So in 1914, we get World War I. 1 year later, 1915, we get Balboa Park Exposition number 1. 1935, we get Balboa Park Exposition number 2. 1 year later, 1936, we get World War II, where they now have yet another name for this building, Building 212, used now by Red Cross, while the Navy yet again modified the interior. Are you still on the fence? Well, there wouldn't be another... No way. This is so clear at this point. The San Diego Aerospace Museum moved into the building, briefly, in September 1961, before transferring its exhibits across the street to the Electric Building in 1963, where they stayed until a fire in 1978 destroyed the building. Now, I have a lot to share, and I think we have a solid understanding at this point that the narrative surrounding Balboa Park has consistencies with what we have seen across the world.
An inspiring story, the history of